Hi guys, BuildZoid here, and today we're going to be doing the Gigabyte Z490, well, going through the Gigabyte Z490 motherboards. And before we get into this, Gigabyte has sent me a Z490 Aorus Extreme, Z490 Aorus Master, Z490 I Ultra, and a Z490 Vision G. So thank you, Gigabyte, for the boards. You'll be seeing PCB breakdowns of them. Like, I'll be doing PCB breakdowns of these boards. And also I'll just be testing them in general, so you'll see me do some memory overclocking, and they might show up on some live streams, the usual AHOs, like, I get a board, I'm going to try, my usual sort of way of testing boards. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of that. I have 4 boards. Then for pricing, we're going to use Newegg because I've straight up been told by Gigabyte the prices for some of these boards, and they match Newegg prices. So we're just gonna like Newegg isn't raising the prices like this. The Aorus Extreme is supposed to cost $800, as ridiculous as that is. Like, that's not Newegg, raising the price up. That's literally what the board is supposed to cost. Same goes for the Master, Ultra, Vision D, Vision G. Like, all of the different boards here, the prices are correct. So let's get into it. Starting off with the air-cooled Extreme, because full cover water blocks on motherboards are silly, and it's kind of that. Like, I refuse to discuss them. So on the Aorus Extreme, $800 board, kind of gigabytes, it tries to do everything. So on the rear I/O, it's fully loaded, right? There's basically no extra space left. You've got 10 gig of Quantia, 2.5 gig Intel, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, USB everywhere else there was empty space. You got a Wi-Fi 6 as well, clear CMOS button, and a Q flash button. So the Q flash is for updating the BIOS of the motherboard without even having a CPU installed. That can be helpful for some time, basically it can help you recover. Like, if you have a corrupted BIOS, you can actually potentially recover from it using Q flash. If you can't, this board is a high-end Gigabyte board, so it still has dual BIOS. So you have 2 BIOS chips on this board. So that's all. Like, it's not even even if you couldn't recover the BIOS, it's not that big a deal because you still have a second BIOS chip. So yeah, that's kind of the rear I/O on this. Other than that, this is one of the most powerful VRMs on Z490. Man, like, the thing is, I don't want to talk about too many things that'll be in the PCB breakdown of this board, because then it's like, why would you watch the PCB breakdown if I tell you everything? But yeah, so, 16-phase VRM, that's with doublers, 90 amps more power stages, 8-layer PCB, PCIe 4.0 red, low-loss PCB substrate. So, essentially, and that's actually standard for a lot of high-end Z490 boards. Like, some of them just don't advertise it. 2x copper, that's also very standard for actually even low-end boards these days. By low end, I mean, I'm pretty sure they have 2x copper all the way down to the cheapest boards. Like, for the main power planes, that's just kind of a requirement. CPUs just pull too much power these days. You can't do anything about that. Anyway, board has a postcode in the appropriate location. You've got this button over here, which is like an OC ignition. It's called OC ignition. It does not work like the OC ignition button on the old Z87 SoC boards and Z97 SoC boards. So what that does is it just preloads an overclock profile from Gigabyte. I wouldn't recommend using that. Other than that, all of your connectors on this board are actually on this edge of the board, which is kind of neat. It also means that Gigabyte had to provide a bunch of adapters because, yeah, all the connectors are right-angled, and so and there's not that much space on the edge of the board, so there's a bunch of adapters for a lot of those connectors over there. But yeah, so they have all of those. What else is there? You've got voltage read points by the postcode. There's a power and reset button over here. Dual BIOS is hiding under there. There's no silly 6-pin power connector anywhere on the board the downside to that is, well, 3 GPUs should not max out to 24-pin, and Gigabyte does use the solid pin power connector. So instead of the normal 24-pin uses has 8.5 amps per pin pair. Here you're looking at the 13 amps per pin pair. So that's what is that? That's 13, 26 times 12. So like over 240 watts. So even like you should still be able to power a triple GPU setup off of just the single 24 pin with this board. Um, well, four-way would still be, somewhat like four-way would probably be a bad idea. Um, but the board doesn't support four-way. You've got dual 8 pins. The 8 pins, like all of the power connectors on Gigabyte boards use solid pins, so even the 8 pins are on the same high current pins. And that does mean that each power, like depending on, like essentially, if you have a power supply that uses 16 gauge cabling and isn't doing anything weird with its modular panel, these power connectors can actually be 600 watts each. But if you have a normal power supply with 18 gauge cabling, then you're looking at 480 watts per power connector, which is 100 watts on top of the usual 384 watts, which is like the standard connector, standard folded pin connector. So yeah, and Gigabyte has two of them. So actually, on this board, you could run a 10900K, 5.1 gigahertz Prime 95 AVX, 400 watts going into the VRM, and you'd have no problem with just the single 8 pin, assuming that your power supply is also good. But yeah, if your power supply, like if you have the second 8-pin power connector available, plug them both in. There's no harm in plugging both in, but you don't need to on this board, unlike with some other boards where you'd actually have standard, like folded metal pins, and those can get quite, like, you can actually overload the standard current 8-pin power connector with a 10900K, assuming you have a big enough cooling system. Also, VRM, like, the VRM cooling on this motherboard, like, those are some huge, ridiculous heat sinks. They're also completely unnecessary because this VRM literally doesn't need, like, this is a 16-phase using 90 amp smart power stages. It doesn't need a heatsink. Like, I actually went and tested that on the Extreme, where I ran the board for like 2 hours, and the only thing that ended up happening, like, eventually the board ended up at like 90 degrees MOSFET temperature. But the problem was not the 90 degrees MOSFET temperature, it was that the board was heating up my room. So yeah, luckily, so the heatsink here is very excessive, but luckily Gigabyte, had some sense and didn't put a fan on it. Unlike a lot of other board vendors are doing these days, where it's just like, look, if we just attach a fan to, like, why do boards have fans? So yeah, this is fully passive. Also, it's worth noting that all of the cover material that you see that you'd assume is plastic is actually aluminum, which is part of why the board is so very expensive, because yeah, this is some rather elaborate metalwork. As far as like the geometry of a lot of the sort of covering pan, like the IO cover, because the IO cover also goes through it also is part of the like audio section over there. Like, that's a lot of relatively elaborate geometry, and it's all made out of aluminum. It's not cheap, and that's part of why the board is $800. And I'm personally not really a fan of that, but at the end of the day, like, you know, um, like, basically, I would have preferred if they'd sold, like, they could have, as far as I'm concerned, Gigabyte should have sold a Z490 Aorus Extreme Lite Edition, which came with no 10 gig, no covers, no M.2 shields, no heat sinks, just the backplate. The board has a backplate, which I don't know if they show off, but the backplate's actually cool. Like, I'm a fan of the backplate, because the backplate makes like the board far like you're less likely to scratch the board installing it, or much less flexible. Big heat sinks aren't going to put so much strain on the board, so backplates are cool. All of the stuff on the front, unnecessary weight that adds cost, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I wish they had done a light edition that would have been like, I don't know, like if they dropped the 10 gig. I'm pretty sure, along with all of the excessive metal work, and also Thunderbolt. If they dropped the Thunderbolt, the 10 gig, the excessive metal work, I'm pretty sure they could have had this board at around $500, maybe lower. Like, it could have been encroaching on the territory of the Z490 Master, and I think that would have been super cool. But Gigabyte disagrees with me because they don't think and the thing is, most people buy motherboards based on looks. So that wouldn't fly. Like, selling a motherboard with literally none of this stuff, like, yeah, apparently wouldn't work very well. So that's a real shame. And making a light edition where it's like, a limited 100 unit run or something doesn't make sense, because if it's a unit, like, if it's a limited run, then there's just costs associated with it being a limited run. So, um, Yeah, that wouldn't do what I was hoping for. Like basically a heavily downcosted version of the Extreme would have been really cool in my opinion. And Gigabyte like technically the Master is kind of that, but the Extreme has the actual 8-layer PCB. And there's other cool things that the Extreme does, which it's not pointed out up here. I wonder if they pointed out anywhere else. I mean, we can see it very clearly here, but they don't specifically talk about it, I don't think, which is a shame. So what I'm referring to is the fact that all of the DIMM slots, like you can't see any pins on the back of the motherboard in this right here, for the memory. And the reason for that is this board uses SMT DIMM slots, which have better parasitics, and in theory should lead to better memory overclocking. So essentially, and the board still uses an eight, like this is a daisy chain topology. Gigabyte is doing full shields over their memory, so just ground fills over all of the memory traces. And yeah, the thing that I'm basically the thing is, I'd like to have the memory setup of this on the Master. That's essentially why I'd want to have a Z490 Aorus Extreme Lite. I'd like to have this 8-layer PCB with the SMT DIMM slots, but without the ridiculous price tag. That would be great. Thank you very much. I'd even be willing to sacrifice a couple phases for that. Yeah, no, like the thing is, the thing is, a lot of the things like the 8-layer PCB, like those are expensive. So the like, well, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna get into the logic of why boards are priced the way they are, but yeah, it's just like there's a lot of cool stuff that you only see on boards that are in this that have this crazy price tag. Where really wish it's like I wish we could get that cool stuff on cheaper boards. But we can't because the cool stuff itself is already expensive, and then we'll not get into that. But yeah, so the memory configuration on this is really cool. Other than that, did I scroll over it? Okay. So other than that, we have the extreme power design, so lots of phases. Yeah. Like tantalum polymer capacitors behind the CPU socket, on the power plane, on the input of the VRM, and also for the memory. The ones for the memory, I kind of really doubt actually achieve any. Like, I don't think, well, like, I don't think those actually do much, but they might, like, it might be possible to actually measure the effect of them with an oscilloscope. I don't think they actually lead to noticeably better memory overclocking. But yeah, Gigabyte's just kind of gone, but the ones for the V-Core should significantly help the board with transient response. So yeah, I'm really excited to actually, build a probinator for Z490 and get to test this because this is cool. This is really interesting. And it's another, like, the Master has most of this. It doesn't have the tantalums on the memory, because the reason why Gigabyte managed to squeeze in the tantalums for the memory is because with the SMT DIMM slots, you can now just sort of whack capacitors behind the memory slots. Whereas normally you can't do that, because where you'd want to put your capacitor, there's a bunch of memory pins, and you can't put a capacitor there. But yeah, here, we've got all of those tantalums, so yeah, that might lead to slightly better memory overclocking, though I really expected to actually do nothing. It's just kind of like, it's neat. I think I'd assume most of the gain in memory overclocking on this board will be from the fact that it's an 8-layer instead of just a 6, and the fact that it's on SMT DIMM slots. So yeah, I'm really excited to try test this board because of all of those factors, but yeah, so this is just a really crazy board. It kind of tries to do everything, and the downside to that is it just has an ridiculous price. Yeah, what else is there to talk about? Well, let's just quickly go through the specs. So Gigabyte advertises this board as doing 5 gigahertz memory. The thing is, Gigabyte is doing 5 gigahertz memory even on their even the Elite and the Vision G, and even like the non-Wi-Fi Elite, all of the, actually, yeah, like down to the Elite, all of the boards do 5 gigahertz memory. And the thing is this is just a limit of the fact that you can't get XMP profiles for more than 5,000. Now, I also know for a fact that all the 5,000 DDR4 5000 speed is done with Hynix DJR memory sticks. So I'm not sure how it's going to play, like if these kinds of speeds are going to be possible on other memory ICs, but yeah, like the memory overclocking, just like this board, like assuming the Elite and all the other boards are basically the same memory topology, from the Master to the $200 Elite, you've got the same memory topology, and then the Aorus Extreme basically just adds SMT DIMM slots, adds 2 layers, and hopefully that is actually enough to give the Extreme a even like better memory overclocking performance, because already the $200 board is really good at memory. Um, and yeah, so like the thing is they've just kind of run out of XMP profiles. Like there's no XMP profiles above 5,000. At the same time, there might be like I'm not sure how well the BIOS on this board, like maybe the thing is, just because physically the board is really good for high memory speed doesn't mean you also, like, the BIOS also needs to be able to support those higher speeds. So yeah, like this is a board I'm very excited to test, because this, like, other than the ITX board from Gigabyte, this is probably going to be their, like, actually not probably, this is going to probably be their strongest memory overclocking board. And so yeah, I'm really excited to test it for that. Anyway, is there anything else I wanted to mention? Not really. So yeah, the board is like I'm really excited about it because I have one for free, but I wouldn't recommend most people buy it because it's $800. At the same time, the 10900K is this weird CPU where it's like, well, you already, like, if you're buying a 10900K, you're already not very cost effective in the first place. So really, what's a real, like, so at that point, it's like, will the really incredibly cost ineffective motherboard really make that much of a difference to the fact that you just bought a 10900K? Like, yeah, now it's $1,300 combined instead of like $700 combined, right? If you went for one of the cheaper boards, but like the 10900K is not cost effective in the first place. So, you know, like the board, this board kind of makes, like, in that sense, the board kind of makes sense if you're doing just like an absolutely ridiculous 10900K build. But yeah, I really wish we could get the memory, like basically the memory portion of this board. If we could get that on some cheaper boards, I think that would be really cool. Though, you know, let's, like, assuming it actually clocks better, because again, I've not tested it yet. And it might be that it actually performs exactly the same as my Master and the Vision G I have. And if it performs exactly the same, then you know what? Whatever. Don't, like, there's no loss to not having an Extreme at that point. But if this is actually better at memory overclocking, I really wish they would have had a cheaper flavor of the Extreme's memory portion. Like they could have literally, like, I would have been fine if they took the VRM like VCore VRM off of the Ultra and combined it with the memory topology of the Extreme. Like that's kind of like, I'd like that. Oh, and dual BIOS, please. Like that would be nice. So it'd be like this weird mishmash between the Ultra Master and the Extreme. Anyway, moving on. Master. Master's $390. The thing I don't like with this board is that $400, most of the other boards have dual LAN. So you can get boards with 2.5 gig and 1 gig, or 2.5 gig and 5 gig from Asus. And here's Gigabyte with just 2.5. So yeah. And you know, so that's 2.5 gig Intel right there. Plenty of USB ports. I kind of wish that, like, it looks like they were planning an extra networking control, like extra network port, and then just kind of decided, you know what, no. And it's like, but why? And I guess maybe they got some feedback that most people ultimately just use the one LAN port or something, which I'd assume most people do. Like, dual LAN is probably a pretty rare thing for most people to run. But it's just like from a purely from a spec list sort of check marking thing, there's less LAN chips on this than on some of the other boards around the same price point. It's got Wi-Fi 6, it's got clear CMOS, it's got the Q-Flash Plus again. It's got a postcode in the correct location. There's a power button as well. I'm going to have to scroll down, aren't I? Yeah. We've got a postcode, power button, reset button that's down here, which is really, like, it's a really funny situation where it's like, there's your power button. That's good. I like that. Reset button down here. Like, this board feels like it's geared very, like, heavily designed to just check all of my tick boxes for what I like in motherboards, because the postcode's in the correct location, not under the PCIe slots. The power button's in the top left corner. I mean top right corner, and then the reset button on the bottom edge because I don't normally care about where the reset button is. Um, but yeah, that's kind of like okay, cool. What like I act like I still don't care. Wait, are the rear I/O ports RGB or something? Please no. No, they can't be. There's no like what I guess the oh, I guess the RGB effect they have for the rest of the board is like spilling over onto everything that isn't black or something. Yeah, the website's just being weird. Okay. Anyway, so this is on a 6-layer PCB, daisy chain topology, regular through-hole DIMM slots. You know, like this is the same topology you get on the Elite. So that's kind of the like I wish we had the Extremes topology, but the problem with that is like with my wish of having the topology from the Extreme is like the Extreme is on an EATX PCB, right? As in it's way too wide for a regular ATX, and the problem with that is if they wanted to, like, I assume EATX boards just generally have problems selling because of the compatibility issues with cases that they have. And so if they wanted to do a sort of like master with the memory topology of the Extreme, they couldn't just take an Extreme and cut down, like, start removing stuff because you'd still have the problem of, like, this is an EATX board. And also just like all of the all of the connectors being right angled and just weird. So you couldn't just recycle the Extremes PCB for the master because it would be like an actual downside to the existent, like it would be a downside for the motherboard, right? And so instead you need to use a more reasonable sort of PCB, and in that case, you know, 6-layer topology. Though this is still on a unique PCB as far as I know. Yeah, this has to be on a unique PCB because that VRM is unique to it. Like there's other boards that use a VRM layout that gets recycled, but this is different. So they're still running 3 different PCBs. They could have totally given us the Extremes memory set up, and then the board would have probably been like 450 instead of 380. So actually, maybe not. Anyway, let's keep scrolling. So VRM on this is 14-phase version of the 16-phase that you got on the Extreme. So this still doesn't need the heat sinks, though here the heat sinks are a little bit less excessive. But yeah, so VRM is great. You've also got less ridiculous metal sort of work. There is a backplate on the board. I'm a fan of the backplate. Backplates are good. And this also has the tantalum polymer capacitors, and they do have them on the back as well as the front. So you're not seeing all of them. There's there's some in the CPU socket, and then there's some on the power plane, and the website is being terrible. And Gigabyte's website has just been really awkward for me the last couple weeks. Actually, I didn't do the Gigabyte walkthrough earlier because I literally had issues loading any images on Gigabyte's website, and that seems to still be a problem. Yay me. So yeah, 5 gigahertz memory. Yeah, the thing is like, I like the in a Void, this is a really cool board. And if you buy it, I don't think you'll be disappointed with it. It's just like the sort of main feature this offers compared to some of the other boards in Gigabyte's lineup is it has dual BIOS, which it's also like there's not that many boards even around this price point with dual BIOS. So it has dual BIOS. That's cool. It's got, postcode is standard at this price point. Q-Flash is standard. Clear CMOS is standard. Dual 8 pins is standard. Like, these are all things that at this price point you just get. That's normal. So, yeah, like, you have, and you also get similar capability VRMs around this price point as well. So, the thing I'm wondering, with this board, it's going to really come down to like maybe it clocks memory better than the other boards at this price point. Maybe it has better transient response than the other boards at this price point. But those are all things that are very difficult to tell just looking at Gigabyte's website. So, you know, wait for testing. Yeah, like other than that, like the thing is at the same time, if you like I think for most people who are just sort of somewhat interested in overclocking, the main benefit to the Master here is the fact that it has a postcode. And if you have it, because the VRM here is really overkill. Like, again, you could run this with no heatsink and it will be fine. It'll run a bit warmer than what you have on the Extreme, but it'll still be fine. So, and no heatsink on a test bench with no active airflow, no fan, none of that cheating. Okay, like I literally went and took the Extreme, took off the heatsink, and let it sit on the test bench for 2 hours running Prime 95, and the VRM was topping out at 90 degrees. So this will probably top out at like 95 or something, you know, slightly higher because you've got 2 power stages less in the VCore portion of the VRM. So yeah, this is a really cool board, but the Ultra exists, right? And like I feel like they should have included the extra networking, not just because other boards at this price have networking. It's also because like you get the same rear I/O, almost the exact same rear I/O on an Ultra. You don't get you don't get Q flash on the rear I/O. You don't get clear CMOS on the rear I/O, but you know you can always just rewire your reset button to the clear CMOS jumper on the motherboard. That also works. So it's not like the biggest benefit here is of course having the postcode. Postcodes are extremely helpful if you're into memory overclocking. This is still a 6-layer PCB, and yeah, like this board actually, the VRM heatsinks are probably actually useful on this one, whereas on the Master they aren't. As in, this board without VRM heatsinks would probably go a few degrees over 100, which, you know, depending on the test scenario, that's not great. Like 100, well, yeah, like you can't, like this VRM, you want the heatsinks on it. Because it is another 2 less phases, and instead of the 70 amp, actually this is still on 90 amp smart power stages. This goes down to 55 amp DR MOS components, which aren't smart power stages. So that's actually a big drop in efficiency, because like a 60 amp smart power stage is quite a jump compared to a 50 or a 55 regular power stage, or a 70 amp smart power stage. Like, funnily enough, 70 amp smart power stages and 90 amp smart power stages are basically the same performance. But yeah, 55 amp DR MOS components, generally quite a big drop going from the 70s or 90 smart power stages to something like this. So yeah, like here the heatsink actually serves a purpose on this board, whereas on the Master and the Extreme, it's more of an aesthetic piece. Here it actually has heat to dissipate. But this board still has a postcode. It still has the same 6-layer PCB. It has a, you know, similar number of USB ports. It still has the 2.5 gig Intel. It has a Type-C port. You get a Type-C port on the Extreme as well. You got Wi-Fi. I kind of wish they had a non-Wi-Fi version of the Ultra. Just because if we look at the Elite down here, so this is Wi-Fi 6 on there. So the Elite down here, we're looking at a like $200 board. Then they add Wi-Fi AC, not even AX. So AX is Wi-Fi 6, AC is Wi-Fi 5. So this is AC, and they're already adding $20 to the price point. So I think they could have probably made an Ultra without Wi-Fi for like $20 less. At the same time, that would have kind of made the Pro a really dumb purchase, because the Pro is $270, and if you had a 280 Ultra without Wi-Fi, you know, it would really, like, I feel like the motherboard, like motherboard prices, like there's a lot of balancing that goes on with deciding how to tier the motherboards, and how to also select the features. Because yeah, if you didn't need the Wi-Fi and there was a cheaper version of the Ultra without the Wi-Fi, that would be a really cool board. But even at $300, this board is still quite competitive. The thing is, at $300, MSI has the Unify, and the Unify has a postcode, has power button, reset button, clear CMOS, rear IO, BIOS flashback, like BIOS flashing functionality as well. And it's not like this lacks the BIOS flashing, right? It has Q flash down there. But the Unify also has a much stronger VRM. Though the thing is, this has a bunch of tantalums sitting in the CPU socket again. And this is a direct 12 phase. There's no doublers in this VRM. So I do wonder, like, this might have a transient response edge over the Unify, as in the VRM on this is going to run hotter, or at least, like, it might not even end up hotter depending on how effective Gigabyte's heatsinks are. But It's definitely going to be slightly less efficient than the VRM on the Unify, or significantly less efficient. I haven't done the math for it yet, but VRM might end up being slightly less efficient, but the voltage regulation might end up being better. Which, like the thing is, as long as the VRM isn't overheating, the priority is having the best possible voltage regulation. It's not like the VRM not overheating, very important. If the VRM overheats, then like if you have great voltage regulation and the VRM catches fire, that's useless. If you have a VRM that doesn't catch fire but the voltage regulation is terrible anyway, is also completely terrible, then it's like, oh, that's also useless. So you need to have a nice balance of both. And this probably hits a very nice balance of having enough power handling capability while also potentially having some amazing transient response, but you need to test that. I am not willing to just go, well, there's no doublers, which definitely has its advantages. It's on 150 nanohenry inductors, so the per phase inductance on this thing is low, which generally helps with transient response. Then you've got the tantalums in the socket, that helps with transient response. Like, physically, everything here looks good. You can still screw up the voltage regulator firmware, so that's kind of the part where it's like you need to test. Yeah, like there's like the VRM on this looks, especially with like the VRM on this is just interesting. It's cool. I like it. You've got an 8-pin and a 4-pin instead of dual 8-pin. It also looks like they had the spacing for a full 8-pin over there, and then they just didn't use a full 8-pin, which is fine, right? Like the thing is, these are solid pin connectors, so that 8-pin is 480 watts. The 4-pin is 240 watts. Like, if you plug in one or both of them, you've got more than enough power for a 10900K, even on a like standard cabling power supply, as in standard cabling is 18 gauge. Has the postcode, and this is a $300 board, so it's a very strong motherboard at this price point, and still has the same memory topology, so very, very strong board. The thing is, you've got similar capabilities from Asus with the sort of Z490-E as well. And then there's just the Unify, where the Unify, like, not only does the Unify have power button, reset button, it also has an LN2 mode jumper, which actually you probably don't need, because Cookie, who's a engineer and the in-house extreme overclocker for Gigabyte, this is on a Z490 Elite. This right here, this score. And this is a 6.9 gigahertz 10900K with 4800 CL14 memory. So, yeah, like, the LN2 mode, obviously, like, having an LN2 mode jumper makes life easier. It doesn't make it's not a necessity, essentially, because Gigabyte's own in-house overclocker is using this right here. Right, like if he's using that for LN2 benching with the 10900K. So, obviously you can like the thing is, and it's true, like the things like the postcode, those are just sort of nice things to make your life easier. They're not necessarily absolute, like they're not necessary. It's just nice to have. And if you're gonna pay extra for a motherboard, most of the things are like, well, it's nice to have those things. And then some of it's like, oh, I just need more USB ports, or more PCIe slots, that kind of thing. Anyway, so yeah, like this board is just like, if the Unify didn't exist, this would be a really cool board. Though it would still be like tied with the Z490-E from Asus, because that's a very similar, like very different approach to the VRM design on that, but I'd assume the results are going to be kind of the same in terms of well, the tantalum in the socket is really new, and in my Z390 testing, the in-socket like multi-layer ceramic capacitor configuration didn't really seem to actually do much. So going from having very, like, the thing is, those tantalums are very high density for how much area they take up versus how much capacitance they have. So there's a good chance that Gigabyte's socket has like several times as much capacitance as what you'd find on some of the other boards at this price. And that might actually be a significant advantage for transient response. I'm just not, like, the thing is, I don't want to say that it definitely is. So if the Unify didn't exist, this board would still, it would still be like who ultimately has the best VRM at the price versus the Dash E, because feature set wise, they're very similar boards. And then with the fact that the Unify exists, it's like, well, hopefully this can, like, hard to say. Really, really hard to say. So, yeah, like $300 on Z490 is ridiculously competitive. I like if you pre-ordered one of these, which in my opinion was a stupid decision, but if you did, you won't be disappointed by the board. Right? Unless you expected to get a power button, in which case, like, you evidently don't have functioning eyes, and life has to be very disappointing if you make mistakes like that, because it's quite obvious that there's no power button on this, or, like, reset button. But, yeah, like, I don't think this board will disappoint you. I just think maybe the Unify might have a slight edge in overclocking, or maybe it won't. Like, this is one of the... Like, at some point, you don't just have physical, obvious differences between boards, and $300 on Z490 is the price. Like, actually, basically from $200 up to $800, it's really difficult to choose motherboards on Z490, because Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte are just putting out such strong options at any price point, essentially. So, yeah, and this is definitely a strong board. It's just like, is it the best board at this price? I'm not sure. Like, it could be. Like, it's not doing anything wrong. It's not doing anything that particularly, like, well, maybe I'll get blown away, by the... Well, actually, the thing is, I didn't request I ended up deciding not to test an Ultra, just because I have I don't want to have so many boards. So I'm testing the Vision G. But the thing is, if I test the Vision G and the Vision G has really good transient response, then the conclusion is the Ultra can only be better. If the Vision G is a disappointment, then I guess I'll also ask for an Ultra to test. Anyway, there's an Ultra G2, which essentially is just an Ultra with, like, actual freaking color on it. So I actually like colorful motherboards, and yeah, Gigabyte's website is gone for me. Yay! This is the same board. It just has, different color choices on it. So yeah, it's a reskin of the motherboard. Anyway, moving on, we've got the ITX Ultra, and I have one of these, and this thing is this thing is so cool. So first of all, please work. There. So first of all, I gotta say I'm impressed with what they managed to squeeze onto the rear I/O with the number of USB ports. This is probably the most USB ports I've seen on a rear I/O on an ITX motherboard ever. So that's cool. There's a Q Flash Plus button hiding there as well. And this board is just like, we've got an 8-phase V-core, right? 90 amp smart power stages, 10-layer PCB. You'll notice that you can actually see the memory traces, so they're not doing the shielding here. I'm not sure, like, Gigabyte still claims support for 5 gigahertz on this board, so I'm not sure if that's going to be a significant difference, or just because, it's, like, it is a 2-DIMM motherboard, so, maybe the advantage from just having only 2 DIMM slots is so big that you don't need the ground shields anymore. I'm not sure, but that might actually be the case. Anyway, the thing I'm most excited about with this board is, if it could please load. Well, it's not going to load. Yeah, it really isn't going to load. That really sucks. Basically, the entire output filter of this motherboard is just tantalum polymer capacitors. And the funny thing is, the Z490 ITX motherboard from Gigabyte that I tested, that board had surprisingly good transient response. My theory on that is that it had all the bulk capacitors jammed closer to the socket, and that's what did most of that. With this board, one, the VRM is jammed right up against the socket, which I'm pretty sure is beneficial. The other thing is it is only tantalum polymer capacitors. So whereas the predecessor on Z490 was still using through-hole capacitors and was doing a good job, so this can only get better, and this also won't have thermal issues because this is on 90 amp smart power stages, and there's 8 phases of them. So yeah, this is a board that I'm super excited to test, and I do have. You do only get the single 8-pin, but it is on the solid pins. So, I wouldn't be like, if you have the cooling system in your if your ITX build has, 400 watts, 400 watts of cooling with low temperature delta, then yeah, you can totally max out a 10900K on this little board. The other cool thing is about this board, oh, it finally loaded. Yeah, so you can see this is just so much SMD tantalum polymer capacitors. Like, the thing that's significant with the tantalum polymer capacitors is not so much that they're tantalum polymers, because you can get tantalum polymers with legs, and those are going to suck. It's that they're that they're surface mount capacitors, because this style of packaging has very low ESL and very low ESR, and the end result of that is that they're just absolutely amazing for transient response. And just soaking up any kind of high frequency switching noise or voltage spikes. So yeah, these are great. The other thing that's interesting about this board is the ITX Z390 board was lacking in the department of various voltage regulators. Like, they didn't have all the necessary voltages for extreme overclocking. This probably does, because that's a voltage like this. There's a bunch of linear regulators hanging out between the memory slot and the CPU socket over here. Yeah. So this thing could be like if you're willing to live without a postcode, without onboard buttons, all of those nice quality of life when overclocking features is what I consider them, right? Like, you can overclock on any, you don't need a postcode to overclock. It's just nice to have. This doesn't have one. But if you can live without a postcode, this does have sort of like, this could be one of the best overclocking motherboards that Gigabyte has for Z490, because one, the VRM just looks like, the VRM looks amazing. The memory setup, it's a 2-dimmer, and it has 10 layers. Like, with ITX boards, the very high layer count is, it's not all going into the memory. Okay, because if you're on an ITX board, there's a very real problem of, you need to fit all of your things like SATA ports, power connectors, USB ports, right? All of that has to be you have to fit all of that on the board. And so a lot of those extra layers are just there because they're necessary. It's not really because, oh, we're super focused on memory overclocking, though I think you can still, you can definitely, if you have a cheap ITX board with, I'm not sure you can do one with 6. But the lower layer counts definitely harm the memory overclocking, but it's not like, I wouldn't consider a 10-layer ITX to be superior, 10-layer 2-DIM ITX to be superior to a, say, 8-layer 2-DIM ATX board, or a 6-layer 2-DIM ATX board, because the ATX board just has so much more space for a lot of stuff that you don't need that many layers in the first place. Yeah, this could be one hell of a memory clocking board and CPU overclocking board as well. Like, the VRM on this is actually stronger than the VRM you'd get on a lot of X299 boards. Like, that is a very sort of ridiculous, and it's true. Like, there's a lot of X299 and X99 boards where you have an 8-phase using 60 amp power stages. Well, this is an 8-phase using 90 amp smart power stages. That's this is one hell of a VRM. So I'm super excited to start testing this board, because yeah, I have one. And it just, hardware-wise, it looks amazing. The main, I just wish it had a postcode. I wish it came with a connector for a postcode. And, a postcode dongle as part of the accessory pack. But, yeah, most people don't care about having postcodes that much. So, I think the thing is, I'll learn how to do my memory overclocking on a Gigabyte board with a postcode, and then I'll go move to this one, so that I have some rough idea of, what to expect. Anyway, I don't think they even have, any troubleshooting LEDs. Even basic ones. Which, that's going to be annoying. Yeah, that really looks like they didn't manage to squeeze any kind of troubleshooting functionality onto the board. So, oh well, hardware-wise, it still looks really, really cool. So, I'm super excited for this board. And it's $270. So, if you, assuming this does well in testing, and you're a massive fan of memory, overclocking, this could be the board for you. Or you're building a single GPU. Like, I wouldn't have a problem sticking an ITX board into an ATX build, especially when the ITX board doesn't have the, like the biggest problem I generally have with ITX boards is that they have like 5 USB ports or something, where it's just like, okay, that's not okay. I need more USB ports, damn it. But yeah, like this actually has a decent number of USB ports. It's just 7 and then a Type C, but 7 is a lot more than 5. Right? And it's not even a matter of how many there are in total. It's just like, well, how many devices do you have, right? If you have 7 devices and you get 7 ports, well, you're perfect. If you have 6 devices and you get 5 ports, that's a problem. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this board. Like, I'm an absolutely huge fan of this board, and I really hope it does well in terms of memory overclocking, because this could be just kind of like if you're doing a single GPU build where your priority is just super high like single core performance, because that's the thing is like you're going to max out your CPU clock, and then you're going to max out your memory, like, and once you run out of headroom in your CPU and your cache clock, right? The next thing you can do to try and improve single-threaded performance even further is hammer the memory, and that's where 2-DIMM motherboards like ITXs and extreme overclocking boards like the Apex have an advantage. So yeah, I'm super excited for this board, and we've spent way too much time on it, I think. Oh my god, yeah, we've spent way too much time on that. Just the first part of the stack. So next, we've got the Aorus Pro. This is an Ultra minus a couple features and weaker. I don't know, it's still in the 55 amp power stages. So yeah, this is basically an Ultra with a weaker heatsink. As you can see, the top part is a bit more aesthetic focused and less surface area focus. Actually, it's not even aesthetic. Like, in my opinion, that looks terrible, but or like, I don't actually think this looks that aesthetically pleasing. Not terrible. It's just like I don't really feel anything about that, but like visually it doesn't do anything for me. But yeah, you can see the priority there was cost optimization, not surface area. Then there's less M.2 covers on the board. You'll lose the postcode, which is annoying. And the thing is, like, once you lose the postcode, in my opinion, you could really go and just drop all the way down to the Elite. You get a slightly different USB port configuration. I think the number of USB ports in total is still the same. You still have 2.5 gig Intel, Wi-Fi 6. This board, in my opinion, has a very hard time justifying its existence. Well, the main thing is, like, it exists because it has Wi-Fi 6, and the Elite doesn't have Wi-Fi 6, but, it's a $270 board. I kind of suspect you could probably get yourself a Wi-Fi 6 adapter for $70. Like, I've never tried to buy one, but I'd assume it doesn't cost more than $70. And if it doesn't cost more than $70, well, you could buy an Elite for $200, buy your Wi-Fi 6 adapter, and you don't need to buy a Pro, right? So that's kind of the thing, is just like, this board, why is it a thing? I'm not entirely sure. I would have much preferred an Ultra without Wi-Fi at this price point, but yeah, you still get, though, the same VRM as the Ultra with the tantalum capacitors, just like the Ultra, so the transient response on this thing should be absolutely amazing. You have all the voltage regulators for extreme overclocking. You can kind of see them over there. And that's where they're hiding on most of the boards, except the Extreme. The Extreme has those same voltage regulators hiding between... that's the wrong Extreme. So on the Extreme, those same voltage regulators are hiding between the top PCIe slots. And Gigabyte's website is just going down for me at this point. We're going to stop trying to load stuff from there. Anyway, so still you have the same 6-layer memory, like this still is on the same 6-layer PCB as the Ultra. Like, basically this is an Ultra minus a postcode and like minus a couple things that in my opinion don't really matter that much. The main loss here is the postcode. So, but other than that, solid board, very solid board. Yeah, Gigabyte's website is just super done with me. But anyway, so moving on from the Pro, let's talk about the Elite. And we're not like, so AC just has Wi-Fi 6. That's literally all the AC version adds. And we should also talk about the Vision G at this price point because, yeah, so this is the Elite AC. This is the... And Gigabyte needs to, like, the problem is they have all of these stupid graphics on their website, and that means, like, for whatever reason, I can't load it. Reload, please. There we go. Yeah, the rear I/O on this is the same as the... I want the rear I/O, damn it. Yeah, okay, that's done. Did it work now? There we go. So the rear I/O is the same except you don't have the Wi-Fi. And that's not Wi-Fi 6, that's just regular Wi-Fi AC. Now, actually, wait, so the Pro actually has one advantage over the Elite that I forgot about. So the Pro is on 2.5 gig Intel. The Elite is on 2.5 gig Realtek. Right? Yeah, Intel 2.5 gig. And the Elite is on... If we could get to the specifications... I have no idea why this happens. Like, I have generally really fast internet, and Gigabyte's website is just... this. This is Gigabyte's website for me. But yeah, this board's on Realtek. Just like actually, let's just check on Newegg, because Gigabyte's website is just not going to work anymore. So anyway, other losses here. The VRM here gets a downgrade from the 5 amp DRMOS components to 50 amp components. There's no more tantalum behind the socket. It's just regular, you know, through-hole capacitors for all of your bulk filtering. And multi-layer ceramics in the socket. It's not like they left the back of the socket empty. They didn't go that far, but there's multi-layer ceramics in the socket instead of the tantalums. Yeah, and this is the board that, you know, Gigabyte's in-house overclocker is currently using for all of his, well, for now, all of his overclocking. Because, like, I assume he's going to move on to the Extreme and the Master eventually. Or more like probably skip the Master and move straight to the Extreme at some point. But yeah, for now he's been posting some really impressive scores with just the regular Elite. So yeah, the board is good. The board is very good at overclocking. Though, like the Pro and the Ultra should have a like. The thing is, this is a direct 12 phase, so I'm not sure how much of an effect. Like the tantalum's probably like the thing is, if you're like there's. Like, I have a theory that there's a pretty hard wall on how little undershoot you can have on a VRM that's basically set by the CPU socket. So, essentially, at some point, the only thing you can improve is the overshoot, not the undershoot. And once you hit that point, it doesn't matter what you do to your VRM, it's just like the undershoot is not getting better, because the only way it could get better is if the voltage controller was able to see into the future and predict a load transient before it even happens. And, well, that's not going to happen. Like, that's not possible. So, you know, yeah. So I wonder if there might also be... Like, I'm not sure also, maybe there's an issue with tantalums and low... Actually, no, there can't be. Because if you look at most high-end NVIDIA GPUs for, like, the last several years... Well, okay, they don't do it anymore, but in the past, it was pretty normal to have a bunch of, tantalum capacitors right behind the GPU core on NVIDIA cards. Even high-end extreme overclocking ones. So, yeah, I'd assume that's not that's not an actual issue. So, yeah, and the Elite is kind of like one of the top boards to get from Gigabyte. If you don't want the Realtek LAN, they also have the Vision G, which I think also adds a few more USB ports. Yeah. So, as well as a PS2 port. And Gigabyte's website is being amazing again. Yay! We need to finish, we need to get this video done. This video has to be finished. Because, I've tried to shoot this so many times, and always it ends up with me not being able to load Gigabyte's freaking website. Vision G. Please tell me Newegg has the rear I/O picture. Yes, they do. So, the Vision G gives you significantly better rear I/O. Well, okay, it's not significantly better, but a different mix of rear I/O. So, you get... Actually, I think you just get more USB ports. Oh no, it works out the same. Oh, you do get more USB ports. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, no, you don't. This has 10. Okay, this has 10, but doesn't have a Type-C. Right, of course. So this has 9 with a Type-C. This has 10 without a Type-C. This also has a PS2 port, which, funnily enough, High-Cookie's Elite has a PS... I'm not sure if there's a photo of the board here. Oh, there isn't. But he needed Windows XP support for his Elite. And for Windows XP, if you like the PS2 has for if you're doing extreme overclocking, there's a lot of benchmarks that just run better in Windows XP. And the problem with running Windows XP on modern platforms is generally you're not going to have USB drivers. So you need a PS2 port to do that. So the Elite that High-Cookie has actually has a PS2 port soldered onto it. But the Vision G also just kind of comes with a USB port. PS2 port. So that's kind of cool. And maybe Gigabyte's website works? Yes, it works now. So yeah, the rear I/O is a bit better. You get Intel LAN instead of the Realtek. So if you care about that, or more like you want the Intel LAN, you can choose this. If you don't care about the Intel LAN, you can take the Elite. This has the same VRM as the Elite. It has different heatsinks from the Elite. And I think these heatsinks are actually somewhat better than the ones on the Elite. But it also looks like that might not be a concern, considering these are still 50 amp power stage, 12-phase VRMs on both of these boards. This still keeps all of the same voltage regulators, and essentially, like, the main thing is the connect, like, this board changes essentially just a bunch of the sort of like what USB ports you get. We'll see. Like, I assume this, like, I have an Elite. I mean, I have the Vision G. So we'll see how well it does in terms of overclocking, at least at ambient. I don't think I'll take mine on LN2, because I'd much rather take the Extreme on LN2 if I was taking a Gigabyte board on LN2, and you might see that in several months from now, because I'm still on a bit of an, like, the thing is, it's not that I don't want to run LN2, it's just that I have a list of priorities on which to spend the AHOC budget, and LN2 is currently not at the top of the list of things I want to spend the AHOC budget on. So yeah, that's kind of the issue there. Yeah, so this still uses the same memory topology. Somewhere here it should say 5 gigahertz memory support, or in the specification page, which I'm going to regret that, aren't I? Yep. Let's just close the Elite page. Oh. Well, maybe Newegg lists the memory support. Like, oh no, this is outdated. The Vision G, I know for a fact, is on 5,000. Because this is the same memory topology as the Elite and the Master, and like all of the other Gigabyte boards except the Extreme, and some of the cheap boards have different topologies, but also there's one exception to that. There's the Designare Vision D. The Vision D, as far as I know, is actually on a ECC compatible memory topology, and as a result of that, it clocks worse. Because for ECC memory, you actually need more memory traces in total, I think. And yeah, so this is not using the same memory topology, so this has weaker memory support, but it also has the most loaded rear I/O of any of these boards. Do we have the Vision G on? Yes, we do. So yeah, I was going through Gigabyte's website instead of Newegg, but like the rear I/O on this board is absolutely loaded. So this is, $300. You get Thunderbolt. You get just a ton of USB, like 8 USB ports, Wi-Fi 6, dual LAN. You get 2.5 gig and I think 1 gig, both Intel. Yeah, this thing is loaded. The compromise is worse memory support, and in my opinion, some of the worst heatsinks Gigabyte has for VRM heatsinks Gigabyte has on Z490. Also, this board's actually, like, you'll notice the PCIe slot spacing is actually designed for triple GPU, which also means, like, as in you can have a 2-slot card, 2-slot card, 2-slot card, and there'll still be 1 slot worth of space between every single one of them, so they can still breathe. You also have a 6-pin power connector at a right angle so that it doesn't block your GPUs when you plug it in. You have a postcode. Like, essentially, yeah, if you're building a workstation with a 10900K, which in my opinion is a stupid workstation build, but hey, you know, like maybe you're doing like audio or something where it's actually very single-threaded. At least that's what I've heard, is that, you know, audio workloads don't like AMD CPUs. So if you have one of those workloads that doesn't like AMD CPUs and can use a lot of cores, but also prioritizes, but mostly prioritizes single-threaded performance, this is this is definitely one of the boards to consider, because like the PCIe slot layout might not be perfect for everything you want to do, but you know, it's an alternative to some of the other PCIe slot layouts you can get, and you have the extra 6-pin power connector. So yeah, if you wanted to hammer run, I don't know, 3 GPUs for like rendering or something, you can. You have M.2 slot, like 3 M.2 slots as well. But I'm not a fan of the VRM heatsinks on this board. They're they're very heavy and very flat. Like, the thing is, I don't think the VRM puts out that much heat in the first place, but yeah, that right there looks like more. The thing is also how many people are going to overclock their workstation that much, right? Like, I'd assume most people building workstations probably like you probably don't want your workstation to be super loud, or well, I know a lot of a lot of people don't want their gaming builds to be super loud, but I'd assume most gamers care less about having the quietest possible system than say workstation users. And so yeah, like this board just has different priorities from what I normally look for in a board. But the feature set is interesting. Like, the rear I/O on this thing is ridiculous. You get a unique slot spacing. You still have a postcode. It's a $300 board. You have the same VRM that you'd get on the Ultra. I'm not sure if this drops the tantalums though. I think it does. Yeah, so this doesn't bother with the tantalums, and yeah, the memory speed here is just 4400, whereas on the Vision G, which still hasn't loaded. I guess the Vision G's website is like super popular or something, which is why it's not loading. Oh man. Yep, this is very much not loading. Anyway, so at $200, I'd probably, like, personally, I prefer the Vision G to the Elite, but, you know, pick your own poison. They're essentially the same board with just different rear I/O configurations. So depending on what you want from your rear I/O, the Vision G might be better. If you don't want if you like the Elite's rear I/O, then you can get the Elite. All of these boards, they don't have postcodes. Like the Ultra is the cheapest board to have a postcode from Gigabyte. But all of the boards so far and the Vision D and the Ultra are the cheapest boards with postcodes. But all of the boards we've gone through so far also have they have 4 LEDs for debugging on the in the bottom right corner of the LED. I mean, of the motherboard. So like down there's a couple LEDs. So it's not like you're completely screwed without the postcode. You'll have some idea of what's going on if you have like a memory issue or a CPU issue or a GPU issue or a boot media issue. So yeah, obviously postcodes give you more information, and on the boards with the postcodes, the LEDs are kind of irrelevant. On the boards without the postcodes, the LEDs are the only thing you get. Anyway, moving on, Gaming X and Gigabyte. Please tell me this one loads. Man. Oh, yay, finally. Okay. So okay, nope, this is still very bad. Unfortunately, this is one of the boards that isn't on Newegg, but I've checked the price for it from a different, I know the price for it. This is going to be about $180. So $20 cheaper than the Elite. And I think this is a big downgrade from the Elite. So if we look at the rear I/O, yes, you get PS2, and actually I think the total USB port count is, yeah, it's still not that bad. Like, this is 8 USB ports. You got Wi-Fi 6, really? This has Wi-Fi 6 apparently. Oh, wait, the Wi-Fi 6 version of this is going to be more expensive. Why do these exist? Yeah, there's a non-Wi-Fi Gaming X. So I'm actually not sure what the Wi-Fi 6 version of the Gaming X is going to cost, but then the Wi-Fi-less, the version of the Gaming X without the Wi-Fi, is going to be $180. 11-phase VRM, still on the same 50 amp power stages. So this is a cool benefit of having the ISL 69269 voltage controller. It goes up to 12 phases in any configuration that is like X plus Y plus Z. And so here they're running it in an 11+1 configuration, which is just kind of neat, and using 50 amp power stages. So the VRM here is still very strong, though. And the heatsinks actually, like, the heatsinks look okay. They're not amazing, but they should, like, this board, 10900K might be a bit hard on this board. It's not, like, shouldn't be impossible to run, but it would definitely, like, you might want to consider checking that your airflow actually reaches the VRM. Because normally, the VRM is in an airflow dead spot just because there tends, like, if you have water cooling on your board, then there's a water pump that doesn't generate any airflow sitting in front of the VRM, blocking any airflow coming in from the front of the case, right? And most people have their top fans as exhaust, which means those aren't blowing any air down onto the VRM either. So, yeah, but if you were, like, if you have top air intake on your case, which is really weird, most people don't do that. But if you do that, then VRM temperatures are fine. Well, can be fine. Depends where exactly the fans are relative to the motherboard. Yeah, anyway, so this, like, for a $180 board, this is actually not terrible. So that's nice. This is not an ATX board. It still has the full memory ground, like, it has the ground shields for the memory. But it's not, like, it's a different topology and it doesn't clock as high. Also, it's not a full ATX board. You'll notice that this is the last mounting hole on this. It's shorter than ATX by a little bit. What else is there? Like, like, this is still a pretty solid option in my opinion. It's just, like, I'd really go for the Elite instead. You still have debug LEDs on this. Like, yeah, well, actually, I'd probably go for the Vision G instead of this. That's what I'd go for. Yeah, this is a surprisingly decent board for $180. Though there's a lot of, like, Z490 boards that are at this price point are pretty solid, like, say, the Tomahawk from MSI, which actually at this price point, I'd probably get the Tomahawk instead. But if Gigabyte, like, I'd assume, well, I'm not sure if Gigabyte can lower the price on this board lower the price on this board, but if they could, that'd be cool. Like, if this was like 170, maybe 160, that would be neat. At the same time, it's just like, would you really not want to spend just $10 more for the Tomahawk? Because the Tomahawk has a really cool feature set. At the same time, yeah, because the thing is, this is on Intel Gigabit. Yeah, and the Tomahawk has 1 gig Intel, 2.5 gig Realtek, if I remember correctly, which is just like that's dual LAN at the same price, which is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, like, so if this was a Z390 board, it would be good. But this is a Z490 board, and Z490 is just like a completely, like, the boards have all leveled up essentially. At the same prices, you can now get much better boards than ever before, and so this is not bad, but I don't, like, at this price point, it wouldn't be my first choice. Anyway, moving on, we have the Z490M Gaming X. This, on the other hand, I would just straight up avoid. And it's $160, which is probably why I'd avoid it. Assuming that it'll load. Well, while we wait for that, I guess we can look at the rear I/O on Newegg's website, because Gigabyte's website is just being terrible. So, the rear I/O on this is, well, yeah, this is ASRock levels, but at 100, like, thing is, this is a $160 board, so the rear I/O, I mean, you know, what do you expect? There's only 5 USB ports. There is still a Type-C, but there's only 5 USB ports total, and there's a PS2 port as well. You do have debug LEDs in the corner, I think. Right? I'm not wrong about that. Oh, this drops the troubleshooting LEDs? Well, that sucks. It still has Q flash, though, so you still have the BIOS flashing functionality on this. I think Gigabyte probably has that on their entire lineup. And this VRM looks suspiciously like it could be the same as the Gaming X VRM, but it isn't. That's the main reason I don't like this board. This uses a bunch of discrete MOSFETs. And Gigabyte's favorite choice of discrete MOSFET is kind of terrible. So, yeah, I'm not really, like, and at this price, you can get, Asus has a board that's similarly priced with a similarly terrible rear I/O, but with actual power stages instead of discrete MOSFETs. So I'd get that instead. Yeah, like you can see these are discrete MOSFETs, and Gigabyte's all like they're low RDS on, but last time I checked, Gigabyte was still using 4C06Ns, and 4C06Ns are terrible MOSFETs. Like they're you're looking at a MOSFET that has a 4 milliohm RDS on, like 4 milliohm RDS on, and that's essentially a problem. And this is an 11 phase, whereas the Asus board, MATX board is like 8 power stages, so lower, like significantly lower phase count. But 50 amp power stage, or actually, it's not 50s. I think it's on 45s. Like power stages are just way better than discrete MOSFETs, unless you have some very, very high-end discrete MOSFETs. There are discrete MOSFETs that can be very good, but these probably aren't those. And that is reason in like that's just like, so like a 6 core, sure. 10 core, definitely, like I would not put a 10 core anywhere near this. Well, the thing is, given enough airflow, you could probably get away with a 10 core on this. I wouldn't recommend it. You can definitely get away with an 8 core on this given enough airflow. I still wouldn't recommend it. Like, this VRM is just like, I would not go for this. Also, the memory speed support is even worse again, though they still, I think this is still on a 6-layer PCB, just because I'm not sure that you can do full shields on a 4-layer. Like I don't think, like the thing that is, if you have full ground fills over your memory traces, where do the memory traces go on a 4-layer board, right? Because the top layer is going to be ground, the bottom layer is ground. There's a power plane that has to go for the memory. Like there's a power plane for the memory that has to be somewhere. So where do the traces go, right? If you have a 4-layer board is what I'm wondering. Though at the same, well, you might be able to do like, could do something like maybe ground all of the. Well, no, you normally don't put 2 channels worth of memory on 1 layer, as far as I know. Like, that's not really a thing. Might be wrong about that, but that's definitely, like, that would already hurt the memory speeds anyway. So, like, yeah, you lose some memory overclocking. The VRM on this is not great. The rear I/O on this is not great. There's an Asus board that, at the very least, at this price point, would have a better VRM. So, I don't like this board. Is essentially what this comes down to, is like, I really don't like this board. But don't worry, Gigabyte has an even worse motherboard. Because of course they do. So that's the MATX Gaming X. Then we have the UDAC. So the UD, and this is the annoying thing, is the Gaming X ATX board, VRM-wise, is actually, like, if they took the VRM of the Gaming X ATX board and put it on the MATX, I'd actually be pretty, like, that would be a very solid MATX motherboard right there. But no, the VRM on the MATX board is actually off of the UD, but the UD actually has a better rear I/O. Of course it does, right? So actually, yeah, we can get this board on Newegg. So the UDAC has Wi-Fi, AC, so Wi-Fi 5, has a bunch of USB ports. Like, the Gaming X is just like, you don't have any USB ports, you don't have Wi-Fi, you have an awful VR, like, the VRM is not great. Like, the whole board, like, there's nothing I particularly like about the board. And I think this board, wait, does this still have Q Flash? Did they seriously not manage to get rid, like, oh yeah, it still has Q Flash, so that's kind of cool. This has more substantial heat sinks. Well, actually no, these look the same, but this has a better rear I/O. It's $170, so there should be a non-Wi-Fi version of this board that's even cheaper, probably like 149, maybe one. Yeah, like there should be a 159, 149 version of this without the Wi-Fi. Yeah, but I don't like the VRM on that is awful. Like, I wouldn't recommend it. Like, again, well, 6-core you'll be fine, right? These boards are meant to power the 6-core, but like, if you put a 6-core on this, you're not going to have any USB ports, whereas here you're going to have a proper rear I/O. Admittedly, some people don't care that much about USB ports, but it's like, what else do you want your motherboard to do? Other than have ports to connect stuff into, right? Like, that's the primary purpose of a motherboard. It's got memory slots, like those are memory ports. It's got GPU ports. It's got sound card ports, network, like LAN card ports, USB card ports. SATA card ports. Like, a motherboard is literally just a very fancy collection of ports. It's got a CPU port, right? Also known as a CPU socket. But anyway, but by far the worst motherboard, and I think, well, I'm not sure if this is literally the worst Z490 motherboard in general, but at least from Gigabyte's lineup, please don't buy this. Just don't. Just like, yeah, just don't. Like, admittedly, that's probably like $120 or something, but just don't. Like, if you're considering buying a, well, I guess if you have a locked CPU, but I could totally see like a 10900. What's the TDP of a 10900? I don't actually know. I guess if you have a locked CPU, this can make some form of sense. But otherwise, yeah, don't. Just don't. And it's not because of the DVI port. Like, this is, like, this motherboard exists probably for like system integrators. I would not build a system with this board. Just no. Because the thing is, I'm gonna, like, this board, like, even if you have a locked CPU, like, on the locked CPUs, you can, I think it's possible to, like, tweak the power limits in the BIOS if you have a Z series boards. And, well, if you tweak the power limits on this and you have a, you know, like, I don't know, locked 10 core, this is not going to be okay with tweaked power limits on a locked 10 core CPU. So I would just not get this. Like, just avoid this. Completely avoid this. Erase it out of your memory. Forget that this is a thing. Because it doesn't get worse than this. It's a 4-phase V-core. Yeah. There's 4 MOSFETs in each phase, but it's still a freaking 4-phase V-core. This is the VRM that, like, I complain, like, this is the same VRM Gigabyte has on, like, their low-end X370, B350, B450, X470 motherboards. Except here it has even less inductors, and I think, well, yeah, less inductors, and so even less thermal mass than the one like, the VRM I didn't like on X470. This is worse. This is even worse than that. So, unless they massively change what MOSFETs they're using, this is going to be just no. Just absolutely no. The heat sinks are nice. Like, well, this heat sink's nice. This one, well, the thing is, it's V-core. Like, there's 3 V-core phases under this heatsink, and there's 1 V-core phase under that heatsink. The other 2 phases are for the iGPU. So, you know, like, it's not... Like, this is probably better than what they did for B450 and X470, but the thing is, AMD CPUs don't tend to pull as much power as massive multi-core, you know, 14 nanometer Intel chips. So that's kind of, like, if you're running a locked 6-core, sure, locked 8-core, I guess, locked 10-core, bad idea probably. Like, this can't do 200 watts. That's for sure. Like, this VRM can't do 200 watts. So, yeah. Like, there are use cases for this board, but none of them include actually taking advantage of... Well, I guess if you're running a locked CPU and you just want to be able to enable XMP, you know, because as far as I know, you can't enable XMP on non-Z series motherboards. So, yeah, I guess if you want to run your locked CPU with overclocked memory... This can kind of work, assuming it's like a 6-core or an 8-core. But I still don't like the board. Also, like, well, the thing is, like, I don't do low-end builds. Like, I've never had to squeeze a... Like, at this point, you might as well consider a Ryzen 5 3600, in my opinion. Right? Like, you'd have a better motherboard, like, a better choice of motherboards. And your CPU would be cheaper, and then you could maybe upgrade to Ryzen 4th gen eventually. Like, obviously you need to buy a B550 motherboard, unless, like, because AMD still, like, yeah, like, AMD's, like, B450, you know, will support Ryzen 4000 on select motherboards. They've still not told us which motherboards those select motherboards are. So, you know, until then, it's basically like you should probably just buy a B550 instead of waiting for AMD to decide which boards they're actually going to support. Yeah, like, low-end Z490, just, like, Because the thing is like, why would you buy Z490 if you aren't buying a K series, right? And if you're not buying a K series, why aren't you buying a Ryzen? That's basically my question. Because the main advantage Intel has over AMD is clock speed. The non-K CPUs don't have a lot of, like, they don't come with a lot of clock speed out of the box. They can't overclock. And so why? Right? Like, why would you get a board like this for your, like, no, why would you get a CPU like a 10400 or something? Why would you get that instead of a 3600? And if you did get, like, because that's the kind of CPU this motherboard is meant for. And it's just like, but why would you get that CPU? So by extension, why would you get this board? Yeah, not a fan of this. The rest, like, basically from like $200 up, Z490 has great motherboards, lots of different choices. In my opinion, kind of too many, like, lots of great choices. In my opinion, almost too many great choices, right? Yeah, below $200, it's like, why are you still looking at Z490? Why aren't you looking at Ryzen? Is kind of my view on the whole Z490 platform. Is just like, this is not a cost-effective platform. Why are you buying a cost-effective, like, why are you trying to find a cost-effective motherboard for your cost-ineffective CPU? Just buy a better, like, buy a more optimal CPU for your like, for what you're doing. Though I guess maybe, well, again, there's like certain, niche workstation uses, but I assume if you have a use that niche, you're aware of what it is and what you need, and you don't necessarily need my opinion. You can look at this board and go like, well, I'm not overclocking my non-K CPU that I'm using because I need a really cheap audio workstation or something, like, or I don't know, whatever random, like, maybe you have some software from like 10 years ago that runs literally on one core. And though, again, if you're doing that, a 7700K exists. You could clock that up to 5 gigahertz on a used Z270 board. And that would probably outperform like a mid 4 gigahertz modern Intel. Because the thing is, like, this platform doesn't give you any extra PCIe lanes. It doesn't give you, like, the Z490 for me is like, it does a lot of cool overclocking stuff, and then it's completely useless in any other, and then outside of that, it's kind of dumb. So, yeah, and that's kind of, shaping heavily my thoughts on the motherboards, where it's just like, if you're not overclocking, why are you even on this platform? Why don't you get a Ryzen? There are some niches where the Ryzen argument doesn't work. I will acknowledge that, but in that case, why aren't you getting like a quad core from Intel on an older platform? Because it's not like, because it's like, if you compare Z490 to Z390, it's like you're not getting any extra PCIe lanes. So if you wanted PCIe lanes, you're not getting those. If you wanted, like, what does Z490? I guess maybe the 2.5 gig LAN, but you can get 2.5 gig and like 10 gig LAN even on some Z390 boards. So that's still not an argument for this platform, right? Or you could just get, well, yeah, like the Z490, low-end Z490 is just very silly, and I'm surprised, like, I'm surprised that Gigabyte is even bothering with a motherboard like that, because it just doesn't make much sense to me. Anyway, yeah, that is it for this video. So the boards I'm testing and the boards that I'm really like, so I'm testing the Extreme, I'm testing the Master, the ITX Ultra, and the Vision G. My favorite motherboards are everything between the Extreme and the Vision G. And actually, like, basically from here, like, these are all good well, actually, no. There. All great motherboards. Choose depending on what you plan to do, right? These are all great boards. Just figure out what you need and make your decision with that. So yeah, this is not a great motherboard because it has a stupid gimmick on it and costs way too much. It's also out of stock. I don't think they made that many, so it might not even be available at this point. So, you no longer have the opportunity to have me disappointed in you by purchasing one of the Waterforce boards. Anyway, yeah, that is actually it for the video. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon where you can support me directly. There's a link to that down in the description below. And what else did I want to mention? Patreon. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up all kinds of, usual YouTuber merch like posters and stickers and shirts and, well, posters aren't very normal. Stickers also aren't, but shirts, hoodies, there's hoodies. Yes, there are. And that kind of thing. So, yeah, if you'd like to support the channel, check out the Teespring store, check out the Patreon. And yeah, that is it for this video. So thanks for watching and goodbye.